Hi everyone. While lockdown's on, I'd like to start a new study called Ecclesiastes. Solomon wrote 3 books. He wrote one while he was a young man, the Song of Songs, about a young man's love for the woman he adores. He wrote the next book when he was a mature man, Proverbs, the wisdom that he'd learnt through life. And then when he was an old man, he wrote Ecclesiastes, and he wrote a philosophical book about what was the meaning of life and found it all meaningless. What a bleak book. Why is it in the Bible? 28 times it says under the sun, and Solomon's saying under the sun there's nothing that has any real meaning in it. But he's looking at just what is under the sun, what is on earth, what earthly life is, whereas we look at under the sun, S-O-N, and what life is like with Jesus. Every negative that we see in Ecclesiastes, we see a positive in Jesus, and that's what makes all the difference. As we look at this book, I want to look at what does Solomon say and what does Jesus say each time. Solomon does ask the right questions. What is life about? What's the point of life? Why should we work hard? How can we make the most of life? A lot of modern philosophical thoughts and ideas are found in this book. Fatalism, whatever will be, will be. Existentialism, live for the moment, who knows what's coming. Chauvinism, men are better than women. Cynicism, even good things aren't really what they seem to be. And pessimism, things are bound to get worse. Today, it's easy to see these negatives as we face lockdown and COVID, and we watch on the news natural disasters and wars, and we're surrounded by conspiracy theories. It's easy to look down and see things as hopeless and gloomy. This book looks at the limits of human wisdom and the disappointment there is with life if we don't discover God's way to live. But Jesus gives us a new perspective, a new purpose, and a new power. John 5:24 says that when we come to him and really lock into him, we've already passed from death to life. Let's have a look now at chapter 1 of Ecclesiastes and see what Solomon says and what Jesus says. Verse 2 of chapter 1, Solomon says, meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. He sees no meaning in life. What does Jesus say? John 10:10, I've come to give you life, life in all its fullness. In Jesus, no matter what the circumstances, life is rich. The second thing is about nature. And Ecclesiastes says, verse 5, the sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. Verse 8, all things are wearisome, more than one can say. Verse 9, what has been will be again, what has been done will be done again. Solomon sees an endless cycle of the same old, and it's boring. What does Jesus say? In Matthew 6:29, he says that even Solomon, in all his glory, was not arrayed like one of these lilies. He saw the absolute beauty in a flower that's here today and gone tomorrow. And he says, if God spent so much time making that flower beautiful, won't he also look after you and provide all that you need? And we are told in Romans 1:20 that through nature we see God's eternal power and divine nature. When I go paddling down the river early in the morning with the reflections on the water and it's still and it's beautiful and the birds are singing, I look up and I say, God, you have made something so beautiful. It's beautiful and it's new and fresh every morning. But Solomon says there's nothing new. Verse 10, is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? His conclusion is no, there's nothing new, it's all the same old thing. But Jesus came to give us something totally new. He tells us in Matthew 9:17 that he needs a new wineskin to contain the new wine. He's talking about the new covenant that he brings. And he says that it's not about what we have done, it's about what he has done. And it's a totally new and wonderful way of life. Then in John 13:34, he talks about a new commandment, that we are to love one another. And that love is not of ourselves, it's from him, and it flows through us and goes out to others. Then in 2 Corinthians 5:17, he talks about a new creation. When we come to him, he makes a new creation out of us, and he transforms us from the inside. This is a totally new way of life, and it's new and it's exciting. Then Solomon goes on to say in verse 11 that there's no remembrance of who we are or what we do. There is no remembrance of men of old, and even those who are yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow. What a sad thing to say, that anything we do will be forgotten and have no significance. That's not what Jesus says. In Mark 14:9, he says, a woman anointed him with oil for his burial, and he said, whenever the gospel is preached, she will be remembered. Then in Hebrews 11, we have that famous chapter about faith and all those who will be remembered for the great faith that they had. 1 Corinthians 15:58 tells us that nothing that we do in the Lord will be in vain. God remembers if nobody else does. I love what Paul says in 2 Timothy 4:8. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. God will reward us. Finally, he says that he has been given the search for wisdom, and it brings nothing good. It's a burden to him. And in verse 18 he says, for with much wisdom comes much sorrow, and the more knowledge, the more grief. He sees this as a burden he's carrying to try and find meaning, and all he finds is grief. Jesus says, Matthew 11:28, come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And he says, my burden is easy, my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. And John 15:11 tells us that in Jesus, he will give us amazing joy when we abide in him. So I hope this has whetted your appetite and lifted your head to see the richness of life under the heavenly sun. More next time. Bye.